Hey guys, Matthew here once again, and we've become the BeyBlade. I took upon myself to try and make a Starforge build work because it's a pretty underloved, underused sword, and for good reasons. It's not really anything, just a bunch of fizz on a two-hander, which prior to this league was actually pretty underwhelming. This league, with the quality buff, it did get a little bit better, so it's actually somewhat of a respectable two-hander, especially if you can utilize the shock value from it, which we kind of can, and I tried to make Cyclone bleed. So that is not something you should really put together. Two words there, Cyclone and bleed, because bleeds you only have finite amounts of, and as such, you won't get that much value out of something that hits this week on a skill. And it's still not very good, let me just be clear. But it does clear pretty well. So that is its end purpose in this build, and it can clear with bleed and with bleed pops that as a slayer I stole from Gladiator. It clears really well, and then I incorporated Lacerate into the build as an additional single target just so that we don't have terrible single target damage. But the idea was to try and see if I can make Bleed Cyclone work all together, and I pulled out several of the big heavy hitter items to try and make that work. We got the Ralakesh, we got the Alessia's Delight belt, so Affliction charges, we got all the charges. We're using Slayer for the first time this league, combined with Ralakesh, which is pretty damn OP. Trying to do all that sort of stuff to make my bleeds with perfect agony as well do as much as possible. The idea was to be pure Cyclone. In the end, it's really good for clear. It's got adequate damage for clear and for actual mapping, but its single target is pretty lackluster in the end game. I think I've pulled like 3 to 5 million bleed DPS, something like that, which, as you know, does enough, but it definitely doesn't do great for the end game. So we put in Lacerate in our spare 6 link, and then just Lacerate occasionally, and that does something like 15 to 20 million DPS as well. So pretty good stuff for a bleed build. And yeah, the idea was just to be Cyclone, and with the Surfboard MTX and then this Automaton Cyclone as well, you can kind of become a bit of a Beyblade, and it's a pretty big novelty, and it's a lot of fun to play. And this is probably my gold farming character of the league at this point. I was, prior to this, most of the time logging onto the Trickster Viper Strike Mamba character to do some gold farm, and that's maybe still the correct play for tier 17s because it's such a overall well-rounded character. But this one does blast maps a little bit faster and smoother, a bit more satisfying, I'd say, as well. And probably going to be just logging on and farming gold on this one from now on. As you can see, the bleed pops do come into play occasionally. On some content, they actually don't even exist because we kill things too quick. Like if you one-shot enemies, then you don't technically bleed them and they don't pop. So in a lot of maps, I wonder why I even have the bleed pops, but then on some things like the Harvest, the bleed pops do help, and they feel pretty cool. So we stole those from Gladiator. They're only like 100 C each, so if they get more expensive, please don't be mad at me. It's not super pivotal to the build, it's just kind of a bit of a fun addition. Other than that, yep, you can see that the way we try and do single target at the moment is to stack up Affliction charges with a Terminus Est in the offhand, and then attack a few times for Rupture on Cyclone to apply as well, and then Lacerate. So currently that's the system. I do have Rupture attached to my Cyclone, and that's how I map and play the game, but it also serves to boost our single target damage, because if you apply some Rupture to the enemy and then hit them with some Lacerate, they are speeding up their bleed ticks, and that's kind of how the gameplay at the moment is for my single target. Just have to do a little bit of melee and then can do a little bit of ranged, but we do seem to have some pretty thick single target at the moment, and I'm looking forward to seeing what this does in all the end game, but there might just be a few fights that won't be great because we are still at our core pretty melee. But it's a thick enough character for what it is. Doesn't look very thick, but it's actually fairly, durable, and I'll go over what makes that happen. pretty much right now. Let's jump into the character. So here's the character level 94. This build brought to you by, and it is a Starforge build. I am sponsored by Starforge for PC. Really nothing to do with it. Like, it's just a happy coincidence because I've been wanting to use a Starforge or a Voidforge for probably about 2 years now, I think. I don't know. It's been quite a while since Voidforge got buffed and then basically put to a point where I shouldn't play with it anymore because it's too expensive. And Starforge has just been crap as a sword for like quite a while. But with the quality buff, the 20% quality actually gives you 20% more instead of just another 20% increase. It's a pretty respectable weapon. Like it's, I don't know, 800 DPS or so, which you can do a lot better than, of course, with a proper crafted item. But the physical damage can shock can actually be kind of useful too. Even in my build right now, if it's just pure like not very strong hitting physical damage with bleed inspired, so most of it is trying to be bleed, it can actually still yield like 20 to 30% shocks, which isn't nothing. It's like pretty comparable to my pride at the moment, for all intents and purposes. It's similar enough, right? So it's not bad. It's actually pulling some kind of weight of its own. Also, it's got some life, bit of area. But ultimately, yeah, you can do a lot better of a weapon if you want. And after playing this character and this type of Cyclone action, it's actually definitely led me to the conclusion that you can do a lot of good Cyclone builds out there right now. I think it's being a bit slept on. It doesn't have to be bleed like this at all. This is probably one of the worst examples of Cyclone you will most likely be able to do out there. Yeah, just like some elemental damage with a big two-hander or one-handers with the runecraft that gives you 2 extra weapon range. That would be absolutely huge. People are saying that brings you back to like Legion levels of Cyclone AoE. And it seems to hit pretty hard. It seems to be pretty damn playable for just a pure Cyclone build. Likewise, you can still incorporate Shockwave, do similar to our Chieftain Shockwave staff build a few years back. So I think it's being a bit slept on, and I do encourage you guys to go out there and try some Cyclone action because it seems pretty damn viable, and it's very much what people wanted for a long time, I'd say. So get out there, give it a shot. This example is bleed, like I said. So we've got Cyclone attached to Rupture, which speeds up your bleeds and more damage over time from bleeds. Stacks up to 3. I think it does say that. Does indeed say that. So you do still want some bleed duration so that it's not like too fast and you don't have ruptures on your target. We've got Fizz damage, Cruelty, Fortify, and Brutality. Fortify, for the most part, actually still gives me about 20 Fortify through most content. Just maybe some bosses it doesn't, but for clear, pretty damn good. And then, if it's not really my main single target anymore, because Cyclone, like I said, has about 4 or 5 million bleed DPS, whereas Lacerate that I just put in the chest recently, only for the past couple of levels, has about up to 20 million bleeds, so it's quite a bit more potent. We can't use the other Lacerate, by the way. The other one is just for one-handers, the bleed specific one, so that's why we're using this one. But this one has unbound ailments because some extra duration when this is going down isn't too bad, and also lets you apply a couple of bleeds and then run away for a bit, not have to just constantly chain stack bleeds. Deadly ailments, brutality, melee fizz damage, and then life tap, because the mana on this thing is actually pretty brutal. As a 5-link, this is 40 mana per cast, so with another link attached, it's going to be like 55 mana, and I've already tried to do a little bit about mana, so it's best to just do life tap and not worry about that shit altogether. Now, we are running an Abyssus, but we're still actually pretty thick. I only incorporated this into the build in the past like 10 levels as well, so you can technically not use Abyssus, and you'll probably lose about 20-30% of your damage and get a little bit thicker, but we're not really that much squishier with Abyssus because the combo of Ralakash with a lot of frenzies and endurance and also some armor stack means that I really don't take that much damage from physical damage overall. So I've got 9 frenzies, I think, which is 36% less physical damage, and I've also got a decent amount of armor. So stack all that together, and physical damage still really isn't that much of a problem, even with Abyssus on. My life pool isn't the best, but it's good enough given that we've usually got Fortify, we've usually got the Slayer Leech thing happening, We've got a lot of regen from this chest as well. Some overleech as well from that leech. So I'm actually somewhat sustainable and thick and durable. But if you really want and you want to copy some template like this, you could remove Abyssus and just have a little bit less damage, because a single target is what's doing most of the damage, and I think it's a bit overkill for most content right now anyway. I also picked up a pair of Replica at Series Acuity to save on a few points for Perfect Agony. So probably the first time anyone's ever using these. 3 points to Perfect Agony, but we're saving those and also getting a +1 Frenzy on that. These are about 5 Divines because, yep, they're still pretty rare, and it's a fairly uncommon corruption to kind of hit. So they were a bit costly, but you know, if you can't get these, pretty normal pair of gloves, and then specking up here is perfectly fine too. You can craft a pair of frenzy gloves, you can get some other kind of cool corrupt, even just Hands of the Templar with max frenzy, probably going to go pretty far, with vulnerability corrupt as well, because I am currently using Assassin Mark, but I think it's worse than vulnerability, especially according to the POB. It just helps fill out my crit at the moment. So Assassin Mark with life tap mark on hit. So yeah, if it just needs to be mentioned, Ralakesh, the super overpowered aspect of them is having all of your charges count as max value at all times. So even if I've got 0 endurance, 0 frenzy, 0 power, I am theoretically using all of them right now at maximum. You don't have to gain them. And it means that you can use an Olesia's Delight, which is +1 max frenzy, but also gives us affliction charges instead of frenzy charges, which is 8% more with ailments and 8% more non-damaging ailment effect, which helps our shocks. So the only problem is you have to then generate these frenzies, because these are now your new frenzy charge. You are not assumed full on these, and as such we have to generate them, but we are still assumed full on frenzies. That's why this combo is so OP. First time I'm using this league, and I mean, I'll probably use some more Ralakesh. They're pretty cheap at the moment, and it'd be dumb not to since they're so good. But the main thing that I was talking about is we get a few frenzies from this node over here when we hit an enemy, unique enemy. We get some frenzy on kill over here to sustain for clear. But then, like I said during the video, when I start out a boss fight, I start out with Terminus Est, and just, you know, 9 really quick crits with Cyclone will top us immediately up to full with affliction charges. So that's why I do that. I guess you could have like a frenzy setup with, I don't know, Quill Rain or something instead, but this is fine. And I'll probably attach a Rupture on the other hand as well eventually, just so that we can start stacking Rupture easier to go into Lacerate if we really want to. The rest of the gear, basically just trying to fill out some accuracy, life. I went for extra stats here, but turns out I don't really need them. This is actually quite a bit of overkill. Not fully overkill, but fairly overkill on stats. So my amulet could be better, but otherwise grabbed Fractured Amethyst and just did some chaos rerolls till good stuff happened, and just bought this ring because it existed and it wasn't super expensive, with some minus channeling cost and then some resists. And this was, I don't know, like 100C. Nothing too special. This corrupt wasn't very much either, like maybe 100C or something. This thing was like 1 divine. The Starforge itself was 5 divines to begin with, and then I divined it a few times to get it good. And then this was probably the most expensive item in the build otherwise. We also have just a Watcher's Eye for fizz damage during Pride. Nothing special, just fizz damage with Pride, because I don't have many mods that I can use to get much better there. The just regular jewel that gives a bit of life and damage over time and crit multi. 1 Light of Meaning over here. I think it was about 1 divine with 6 fizz damage, so that generates me, I think it's got about 23 nodes right now, so you know, over 120 fizz damage, 140, something like that. Pretty good stuff. And then the Forbidden Flesh and Flame for stealing the Gladiator bleed pops, which, like I said, probably about 1 divine each, 100C each, something like that. Not mandatory, because yeah, a lot of the time it's not even working if we just crit things really hard. You can help that by putting deadly ailments in there, and sometimes I did, but on the higher end content, it was better to just have Rupture up on everything while spinning. I started out by going with Impact, which gives us some range. I'm not too sure about even using this anymore because it's not super worthwhile. It's basically for a little bit of range, and accuracy in area. That more melee damage won't help for bleed. So we could instead do this if we fix some of those other problems, and I might do that. Otherwise, yep, crit, solve Starforge crit, max Frenzy's endurance, and then the bleed thing. And then specking a bit all over the tree. Nothing too crazy, just using Battle Hardened for this stuff, and that one's not a anything. And yeah, that's basically the build. We need some bleed chance, so we do have to spec some bleed chance across the board, which feels a bit wasteful, but is what it is. And then some other weird shit, but it all works out. Maybe we cut this and get something over here instead. I don't know. It's not a super optimized tree. I just basically made it as I went and haven't refined it because it worked well enough and I can't be fucked. And then I'm running haste just for a bunch of extra speed so that we are surfboarding a bit faster. But you could instead do like malevolence for more damage, or determination or something if you want to be a bit thicker. Yeah, the interaction, like I said, basically just this surfboard MTX, which is from supporter packs. You can get a cloak MTX from current mystery boxes that'll do similar. And then once you're surfing and then using the MTX, it really does make Cyclone feel quite a bit more dynamic. So in a way, it feels a bit pay to win just because it's a lot more fun. But obviously, there's no actual extra winning thanks to this. It's just a lot more fun to spin around and feel a bit more control over your Cyclone in some way. So that's the character. We'll probably do some 17s and some Ubers and stuff, and I'll farm all the gold on this guy because it's a lot of fun. Probably another update video just on some bossing and stuff, hopefully, if it goes well. Otherwise, if it doesn't go too well, I'll just mention it next time I make another video, how it went. But with that, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.